Good morning, everybody. Oh, just checking the time. No, it's not good morning. It's 12:05, so it's good afternoon from here in Brighouse, West Yorkshire. This is my next update on the Sew for the Soul. I thought I'd make this quite a decent update because there are a lot of people that have just joined in, have found my challenge via quite a few different routes. Rachel at Roxy Creations, and I've also seen it mentioned on a few other YouTube channels. So thanks ever so much for the mention, and thank you to all the followers that have started this challenge. So I thought it'd be well worth just talking through the whole of my piece, just so that it updates people on where we're up to. And I'm trying to answer as many questions as I can and go and like people's work and make comments on it via YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. It's taking quite a while, so if I've missed you out, I'm really sorry. I do keep trying to catch up every day, but it's fantastic that there's so many people and there's so much beautiful work and beautiful colour combinations. I've got a lot of fabric envy and lace envy and all different sorts, and it's just really making my day at the moment and keeping me going, as I know that this is keeping quite a lot of you going in the current situation. I hope everybody's well, everybody's safe. So quite a few people have asked me why I started this original challenge, and it all stemmed from at the start of the year, just after Christmas. I've been doing a lot of work. It was all ready for the British Craft and Trade Fair, and it was making work for a reason. So my vintage postcards, brooches, pendants, all different sorts of things that I do in my other work, I was busy making that, and I got to a stage where I wasn't enjoying it as much. I was still enjoying all the stitching, but it was becoming a bit more like a production line. So I thought, right, I need a bit of a breather during the week. And a few years ago, I did a Sew for the Soul, which is where my little number 4s come from. And it was just a stitch a week. And I thought, well, that was really nice. I really enjoyed it. I'll start doing it this week, not this week, this year. And last year I did a lot of borrow stitching. All came from a lady called the Border Tart on Instagram, who did these beautiful kits, borrow kits. So this is one of her kits, actually. I think I showed it the other day on my Instagram, that I've got as one of my projects to do, which is a little tin. I just love these. I love things like this with loads of beautiful fabrics in it. A little bit like I've been doing with my kits. It's quite nice sometimes to buy things from other people as well. So there's all sorts of bits in there, and she gives instructions, and I think this one is to make, I think it's a needle case. So there's all sorts of things in there. So this is where it all started, was from doing a kit which was borrow stitch, and from that I carried on and I did myself a book bag over Christmas for my sketchbook, for this year's sketchbook, and absolutely love doing it, just sitting and doing the stitching. So I thought, right, I'm going to take this and I'm going to just stitch. A few people have been asking, what's it for? Is it going to be made into something? And the answer, really simple answer to that, is no. It was never intended to be made into something, because the idea about it was the fact that it was just stitching for the love of stitching. So I've got some bobbins that one of my friends, Judy, made, and I thought, oh, I'll do a piece on a bobbin because I do love working around bobbins. One of the other ones that I had done previously was on a workshop with Emily Notman, and I'd done a piece of work, and this is one of my other bobbins from her, and it's a piece, I just did a small piece that was just wrapped around the bobbin, and I just absolutely loved that as well. Really loved doing it, but I thought I wanted to do more. So the idea with this was that it was going to be just a long strip, and I'd just start stitching, and I would set myself a challenge at the start of every month and just keep adding a bit. So the base piece of fabric that I've used is a cotton wadding. You don't have to use cotton wadding. I just use it because it's just so soft and so tactile. It's lovely to stitch into. Gives a little bit of a quilted quality to your work. It makes it a little bit thicker, and I just find it really homely. So that was the first thing, was just to get my backing piece of fabric. I've never got an idea of how long this was going to be. I've just measured it today and I've done 1.30 m so far. It's 8 centimeters wide. I think I'm probably going to get to about 2 meters, depending on how long this lockdown goes for and how long the challenge goes, because originally the challenge was going for the whole year, and actually where we're up to now, the next task that I am going to set was actually July's task, because everybody's been joining in and really wanting to crack on with this. I know some people have done 2, some people are on to their 3rd piece, which is amazing. I've sort of speeded things up a bit, so I keep dropping little videos in, but I thought I'd do quite a big one today, like I say, just to give everybody an idea of where it's all heading. So the next thing to do was, once I'd got what I wanted to fasten it to, and if you look at one of my previous videos, I talked through all sorts of different things. I had a friend the other day saying that she'd found a piece of driftwood and she was going to attach hers to driftwood. Some people have got the really big vintage bobbins. Some are doing it on the wire quilt hangers. So there's no right and wrong as to what you're going to hang it to. It doesn't even have to be a hanging. It could be a nice square piece that you work on that could become a book bag or a book cover. Absolutely anything. And that's the whole point about this. I didn't really want there to be a pressure of I'm making something. It's just about enjoying doing your stitch. You just have to excuse me, I have to keep blowing my nose. I've got a little bit of sniffles. It's hay fever season. And I found that I'm allergic to blossom trees, and we have 6 of them down the side of our garden, which they were there when we moved in, but I have found that since we moved here I am allergic to blossom, so I'm sorry if I keep having to blow my nose. So once I've got that, it's then a case of gathering together your stash of fabrics. So I have my stash of fabrics here, which keeps growing. Even though we're on lockdown and you can't go shopping, the internet is very, very dangerous for doing little bits of shopping on. So these are my fabrics, and I've got a little bit here on the end. I've just started extending this piece. So it was a case of just playing around with cutting and placing the fabrics, really playing around with your fabrics. And if you've got little frayed, fluffy edges, let them show. The printing sections at the end, if they've got words, numbers, let them be there. Just celebrate the fact that it's fabric. This is fantastic for using up all those little bits and pieces that you've got. I pin them all in place just to hold them down. You can tack them if you want to, but I just tend to just pin and stitch and just remove the pins as I'm going, which I know technically isn't the right thing to do, but it's just the way I tend to work. It's just to pin. There is a disadvantage. Sometimes you can do things and you end up hiding a pin, so you have to try and find it again. So that was the first thing, was just getting you back in and just beginning to stitch things down. A few people have asked about the type of stitch that I tend to use, and with slow stitching and things like that, straight stitch and running stitch and seed stitch are one of the most utilized stitches in that particular technique. So that's what I started off using. And I think particularly if you're a beginner stitcher, a straight stitch can look absolutely beautiful. So just following shapes around and not just doing one line of stitch, maybe doing 2 or 3. You've got some tiny little seed stitches here, which are stitches that just go in different directions. And if you've got a little shape, they're just beautiful just to fill the shape. So I've got a grey background and done it with the yellow, and then on the yellow background I've done it with the grey. So you can really play around with your colours. So the first section that I did was this bit here at the top. This was January. So you can see how much I've been doing. I've got a bit carried away, and I know a few people have definitely agreed with me that this is quite addictive. I've just got some new fabrics that have just arrived today because I just got a bit excited buying fabrics, and I'm thinking that I might actually start another one to have another one going at the same time as this. I don't know if I'll do that one on a bobbin. I might do a different shape. So if I do, when I get round to doing it, I'll start sharing what I end up doing with that one, because I fancy doing a different colourway. I've got 2 little samples here from kits that I've got. This is the red, white and blue. exactly the same technique, not as detailed. The instructions are not as detailed as the videos and things, but you've got the videos to come and look at. And then the neutral one, I just thought this was lovely because it really celebrates the textures and all the different types of threads. And then there's a vintage pink one and one that's more heathery purples and greens. So they just look really different, and I'll keep adding these kits. I think I've run out of the cream one, but I've got a few of the others left, but I will start putting some more together this week if I've got time. But I am back at work next week. I'm a teacher and we're on a rota at the moment for students that are in school, so I am in work next week, but I will still keep updating stuff as much as possible. A few people have asked about the threads that I use, so I've got a selection of the threads here. There's no rights and wrongs. It's a personal preference for different things that you would like to use. You can use the DMC stranded threads, and if I was, I'd only use 2 or 3. Sometimes I might use the full 6, but it can be a little bit chunky. But I've got a full range of threads that I have, and there are different places. I think I've just put it on my Instagram. I don't know how well you can see that, but this is where I get a lot of my threads from. So HanneMADE, these are linen threads. I got these from Yarndale, which is in Skipton. I'm really hoping it's due at the end of September. I've got just about everything crossed. I haven't found out yet whether I'm there because I don't think they're in a particular rush to start sorting things out, but hopefully I will be, and it's a fantastic event to go to. I know people from all over the world have been. So these linen threads are absolutely gorgeous to work with. They can be a little bit tricky because they are quite a thick thread. So you do have to have a little bit of patience when you're stitching with them, but sometimes running them through some beeswax just to soften them down a little bit can just help when you start stitching. I've got silk threads that I get from Airedale Yarns. It's local to us up in Keighley. These are lovely to stitch with. You just get a little bit of a sheen from those threads. Linleden on Instagram. I first found her work at Knit and Stitch in Harrogate, and she has these absolutely beautiful linen threads. Some of them are vintage, some of them are fairly new, some they're just spooled onto a little roll of paper. She does treasure boxes. When they're on, they are slightly addictive. A few of my friends know how addictive they are at just buying just collections of different sorts of threads. Threads for me are a little bit like fabric. I just love them, just have tins and tins of them. Your pearly cottons, I love these because they have a lovely sheen on them. Some of the ones that I've got are old ones, the vintage ones that I've collected at vintage fairs, but you can get new ones. I tend to get mine from the village haberdashery, and you just get a full range of colours and different weights, right up to you're also using crochet cotton, which is nice to stitch with as well. And then I've got machine threads. I tend to collect these as and when I'm out, usually at vintage fairs. You can get them on eBay, and they're just beautiful to start stitching with. So I got together a range of colours that match my fabrics, just so that I've got all different ones, and I keep changing the ones that I'm using. So once I've done that and I'd laid down my stitch, then the next challenge that was February, which is when people started picking up on this particular challenge, because I'd started my YouTube and I just thought I'd video what I was doing as a little bit like a documentary of the actual project. So the next bit that I did was the Suffolk puffs, and I've got a video just showing you how to make Suffolk puffs. Loads of different things that you can do. I know people call them yo-yos as well, so that was a new one for me, so I've learned a new term. So making lots and lots of Suffolk puffs. I've got a little tin now with them all in, so if I don't know what to do on an evening, or I'm a bit fed up of stitching this, I will sit and make some Suffolk puffs. So adding these, but also popping inside little bits of contrasting fabric and stitching French knots in there. When we get around a little bit later on, we were adding buttons. So some of them I've added buttons to, and they just look lovely. They remind me of limpets at the seaside because I overlap them. I will do one singularly just on their own, and then look at how I can stitch around those. But I really do like them where they're overlapping. they sort of start coming alive with just the textures and the colours, and then you start doing the stitching around the edge. Excuse me. So when we'd done that bit, I was up to, I think, around about here. So that was January and February. I hadn't intended to do that much, but I took it with me when we went away to Wales and ended up doing quite a bit more. So the next challenge was something that I absolutely love, which are knots. I get quite addicted to knots, and I just think they're fantastic for adding texture to pieces of work. So just adding, just trying to get it so that you can see, little French knots, but doing them in a line, so they sort of go in between your stitching. That can be really, really nice. Whoops. If you've put on bits of lace, just adding knots in there. Bullion knots, I absolutely love bullion knots. I've got a little video on Instagram that I sat in the garden the other day and just showed people how to do bullion knots. Colonial knots, which is a figure of 8 knot, and then a pistol stitch. And like I mentioned before, I had done one, here we go, just down here where I tacked a button in the middle, and like I said, I got this from my friend Jane. Did the pistol stitch all the way around the edge and then removed the button so that you can see the fabric through the middle, because I think it's nice to overstitch, but it's also nice to get little bits of fabric that you can see as well. So those were the knots. When we'd done knots, we then went on to adding things like buttons and all sorts. So I've got a little bit of an addiction for getting linen buttons. I usually find these in vintage fairs and on eBay. You just have to keep an eye out. Some people sell them and they're really, really expensive, but then every now and again you get a little tin of them, and you just have to keep your eye out. But hopefully I won't end up bidding against everybody now. But they are just gorgeous to work with. I leave them white. But I do know, I think it's on one of the posts that I'd shared, or one of my friends shared, Rachel Singleton, and she's doing she's on her second one that's going to be based on bluebells, and it looks like she's dyed her buttons so they match the fabric. So you've got that option as well, because they're fabric coated. You can buy new ones, so you don't have to just get vintage ones. You can get cards that have got brand new ones, and if you're going to colour them, then that's perfectly fine. They're just ideal to use. Adding buttons though are really nice. I've got some of them here that don't actually have the eyes in the middle, and they're just really nice to stitch on. I tend to stitch them on in odd numbers. It's that design thing. Things are better in odds rather than evens. If you go evens, you need to be symmetrical. But just playing around with different sized buttons, so slightly getting smaller, stitching them on slightly differently. So with these ones here, I've actually done a blanket stitch around the edge of the button, so you don't have to stick within the hole, you can come out of the hole. And then I started adding other bits. So I'd got some tiny safety pins that I just got from our local haberdashery. You can just buy them in boxes. Just safety pins. So I'd got some black ones and I'd also got some brass ones. When I was rummaging around the other day, I've also found that I've got some giant hook and eyes. So I think they might start appearing at some point on my piece of work. So anything that you've got, you could start adding at that point. So once we'd done the buttons, I'd found that I'd got to the end of my piece of work. So I think I'd got to about here, and I knew the next section that was coming on, so I just had a little bit of time adding extra fabric just to give me another base to start working from. And then we went into paper piecing, which again, there's another video that just shows you how to do the paper piecing and just make patchwork hexagons. They can be any size at all, any fabrics from your stash. Slightly thinner fabrics are a lot better for your hexagons, and you can either put them on as singles or make patterns out of them. So that was the next bit, where we've got the patterns going on with the paper piercing and just adding that on. And that's sort of where we're up to at this moment. So anybody joining in, you can mix and match the order, or you can do them in the order of the videos. That's totally up to you. I know when I've been looking at people's work, people have thrown in other little bits and pieces. So some of my future challenges, sorry, mine be something that you've already added to your piece. It doesn't really matter. It's just a case of me just giving you ideas as to what you can do. If you have any ideas about things or suggestions that you'd like me to have a go at, drop me an email, drop me a message, let me know. I know I've got a couple of extra bits coming up next that I want to start dropping in over the next month. But the next bit that we're going to look at is something that, for those people that know me, they know I'm not a very blingy person. But I just thought, I just love playing with texture and things like that. So I thought we'd start adding a little bit of bling, which I know some people have already done. So I have my little dish here of beads, shiny bits, and I never really used to be a magpie, but going to knit and stitch with my friend Alexis, we always go to the Spellbound bead stand, and they do online. They're open at the moment. They're doing online delivery. So I've been holding off doing this because I've been waiting for a delivery of beads from them, because I'd selected some specific ones that I really, really wanted to use. So the beads that I've got on here, there are a full range of beads. The ones here in the middle, this is just out of my bead box. I used to keep them all as individual colours, and then it just got a real faff just getting different boxes out and things, so I ended up just mixing them all together. So there's all sorts in here, little seed beads, bugle beads, there's bits of sequins, there's all sorts. I've got loads of different beads and things in there. Some of these ones are from Spellbound beads, so I just love the fact that you can get squares. Some of these, I'll hold this up a little bit closer just to see how close I can get so that you can see my little selection on my plate. So there's all sorts here. So with some of them, most of them are actually for jewellery. So these ones here have got tiny little holes just in these sides. So when you put them on, you'll not be able to see the thread. So just little squares. Got some lovely little discs where on one side they're yellow, the other side they're silver. So that fits with my colour theme brilliantly. Just some tiny jewellery findings, some gorgeous little ones here that are just some nice shapes. I'll talk about washers in a minute. But I've also got bits of jewellery. I love going to our local charity shops and just looking for old bracelets and necklaces and things like that, and just then taking the beads off them, because I just think you get a lovely texture, and sometimes you can get things that you can't actually buy as beads, and it just gives a really, really nice mix to what you're doing. So for stitching the beads on, I have a beading thread. This is really nice to use. It's a flat thread, which makes it a little bit easier to go through the eye of the needle. And I have a beading needle. I don't even know if you can see that. They're really, really fine needles. I tend to have a few of them because when I've been using them for quite a while, they end up bending. You can just use a really fine needle that has a thin eye on there, but you just need to check that it will go through the eye of your beads, because there's nothing more annoying than actually getting part way through sewing and then realizing you've got to change needle because it actually doesn't fit. So if you have a look at my piece, I've gone back to the beginning because I think one of the things, rather than just keeping adding and adding and adding, I love the idea of texture and playing around with things, and I have got little gaps. It's becoming really, really full, but it's quite nice to go back and start attaching some little bits. So little pieces that I've done, I've just added some tiny little hearts that I've got right back at the beginning. I've got some little squares. Just try and open that up. The weather's a little bit duller today, so the sunshine's not shining through the windows much, which is good, but then it's not good because it's a little bit darker. I've got some tiny little square beads there that I've actually stitched on with the stitch. Don't know how close up I can get that so that you can see, with the stitching going to the outside of the beads. What I will do is I'll post some pictures on Instagram that are a little bit closer. I've got a tiny bit of lace here that I've attached some beads just to some of the joins. So that's picked out some of the yellows. And the idea is that you can then just keep adding little bits and pieces. So I've got these really cute ones that are just pointing out some really little silvery, sort of like teardrop shapes that are really, really pretty. And just for stitching on, it's really just a case of just getting your needle and your beads and just beginning to stitch. You can put them anywhere. Obviously this is going to start making it a little bit thicker in some places, but it's all just meant to develop as it's going along. Good idea not to stab yourself like I've just done. So if I come up with the needle first where I want it to start and then pop my bead on the needle, I know it's going to be in the right place. So my job for this week, and this is it's really nice, very, very therapeutic to sit and just start stitching the beads on. It means that you can go back through your piece and just go back and enjoy the beginning bit. Sometimes what can happen is you can get further on in your piece of work and you actually forget all the stuff that you've just done because you get carried away with the next bit that you're just working on. And I just think it's really nice to go back and just start looking at where you can start enhancing the little bits that you've already done. I don't know how many beads I will get on here, but I've got quite a lot. So, I know when I've been looking at other people's work, I have seen that quite a few people have already started adding beads to their piece. And it's one of those things, you sort of have to make a bit of an artistic judgment whether or not you need to fill an area, but it's also quite nice to have a breathing spot. And by that I just mean somewhere that's just a little bit calmer, probably not as much stuff stitched on. So I'm actually stitching over some of the stitching that I've done underneath that I did on this little bit of lace, but because it's sort of like a flower shape and I've got these beads, they're a bit like petals, it just seemed too much of a good thing not to add some beads. Just finishing it off at the back, I tend to just do a couple of loops and then just knot it off. If I'm doing beading, I would always knot it off in the section that I've done and then redo my needle and start again somewhere else. With your stitching, you can just move it from one bit to another, but with beading I don't tend to do that, because if the beading thread broke, you wouldn't want everything to fall off. So hopefully you can see I've just added that little flower of beads just to that little bit of lace. Other things that you can do then is using unconventional things. So I have here some washers, and one of the things that you can do with washers is do a button stitch around the washer so it ends up with some thread over the top, and then these can be stitched on as well. So you can sort of start making your own pieces of embellishment really. So I've just got a normal washer from the hardware store, DIY shops or anything like that, and just to start you off, basically you're just going to hold the thread through the back and you're going to do a button stitch. So your needle's going to go through between the, see if I can put something a bit darker underneath so that you can see a little bit better. Hopefully that's a little bit better. So I've got my thread that's running there at the back, and I'm just going to pop the needle through that little hole that's been made. I'm holding on to the little tail that's here, and I've made a buttonhole stitch. Okay, and you just keep working your way around. I apologize that I'm going left-handed. But for those lefties out there, and I know there's quite a few of you that are following, it is quite nice to see somebody doing stuff left-handed. So I'm just holding on to that little bit there. Once you get going, you can let go of that. But what you can do then with this, you can either do them really close together so that it ends up all being covered in thread, or still just leaving a little bit of silver showing through, or if you've got rusty ones. I know some people are doing work that's rust based, so you can just keep going. So all I'm doing is I'm just pulling that thread across the back so it makes me a little semicircle, and then just popping the needle through, just drop it down, and you can just keep working your way all the way around. When you get to the other side, then what you're going to do is the little tail that you've left, you include that in some of the stitches. So just speed up a little bit. But it's just quite nice because you get that contrast of thread and the metal shining through. You can do this with anything that's round, so rubber washers, I know you can get some black ones of those that are a little bit like tubes, little round beads. If you really wanted to, you could get some little bits of card. At a push, I suppose you could even do a sweet. Not ideal. Your work then becomes quite sticky. So I'm just going all the way around. Okay, so when I get here, this little tail, I'm just going to pop that at the back, and then I just make sure that when I'm coming through with these, I'm trapping it. It just means then it won't come undone. Okay, so just got my little bit there going across, and then just the left hand side, just pop it through. Then when you've gone all the way around, all you then need to do is with this thread and your needle, so if I just say I've gone all the way around, just on the back, just thread it through just a few of the pieces on the back, and then you can trim. Put that there. Just spread the line. Well, you could spread them evenly, or you could group them together. If you want to group together, put that on there. Just hold that up. Hopefully you can just see that. And it's just quite nice because then when you've got that piece, you can find a section on your piece and then just stitch it on, and it gives you another texture just to start playing around with. So that's adding washers. So you could really play around with this and then start adding little bits of buttons and beads over the top and just carry on the shapes. I think because I've done the Suffolk puffs, circles seem to be becoming really popular, and I've seen some beautiful circles stitched on that's given me a few ideas for different things coming down the line. So the next bit really is adding the bling. Any bits that you've got, found bits, new bits, old bits, necklaces. You might have a clear out of your own jewellery, and maybe start taking things to pieces. It can be quite dangerous when you start doing that because you can end up taking a lot of things to pieces. So your next challenge then is to bling up your piece. Keep coming back, keep looking at stitching. Don't just keep, like I said, don't just keep adding. It is quite important to come back and just do a little bit of a review. And sometimes when you come back, you'll look at things like when I was looking at this bit of lace, I didn't quite like it, but now I've got some beads on there. It's just broken it up a little bit. I do like it again. So you will fall out with bits and then like them again, but adding other bits and pieces. The other videos that I'm going to start doing, and I'll try and get one on probably for next weekend, is looking at the edges of your piece. Some of the bits of fabric that I've got on here I absolutely love because they're frayed, but there's other bits that I don't quite like. So I've been teaching myself some new stitches. Just pop that under there. So I've been using a bullion knot to make some really cute little edges to a piece, and also somewhere else, here we go, using a blanket stitch, I've started adding little loops to the end. So I am going to start looking, there's another bit there that's got edges, I am going to start looking at the edges of the piece because I think that's an area sometimes that can go missed, and you can end up with them really raggedy, you can end up with them really smooth. So I have some edges that are cut off really nice, some that I love because they've gone all fluffy, and I might even come back and shred them a little bit more and fluff them up. But I think it's quite nice again just to start mixing things in. The bullion knots, just going back to that, so when you keep looking at a piece, I keep seeing different bits that I've done. Your normal bullion knot, when you do them, they tend to be quite flat because you've created a length of stitch. But one of the things that you can do is when you come up and you've wrapped your needle round, you can go back down where you've just come up, and what you then create are like these little hummocks, little they stand up off the surface, and they're really cute. Again, it adds another texture to your piece of work. So I've got some plans for some other bits that are going to be coming up, but because we're halfway through April and this was meant to be July's challenge, we are flying through this. I am going to leave this as the challenge for the rest of April so that people that have just joined in can have a bit of time to catch up. Some of you can go back. I know once I've attached all my buttons and things, I might start another piece because I'm a bit excited because I've got some new fabrics and some different colourways that are not normally things that I do, but I thought I'd have a go at doing something else. Probably won't do it as a strip, but I do quite like the strip. People have asked what's going to happen to all these. I have no idea. At the moment, mine's just on a bobbin. It's going to be 2 meters long, so I'm not really sure where I'm going to have it if I do display it. I do like it when you wrap them up. Oh, that was my little face. It was quite funny. I was busy playing around with it, and when I wrapped it up and looked at the side, because I've done these little curly bits on the edge there, and it was on the smile, it looked like he was smiling, which I think is quite cute. But when you wrap it up now, it's not quite 2 meters in length. I still need to add a little bit on, but it is getting now to the stage where it is the width of the bobbin. But I quite like the fact that it's going to go beyond it. It might be that I do something that could be a container for it to stand in. I don't know. There's all sorts of things that you could do. You can even do bits, small bits to go on the ends, but I quite like the cracked pieces on that. So you could do bits to add on to that. I have got some bigger bobbins, so I might do a slightly shorter, I don't know. I need to get my fabrics out and just have a bit of a play. So I might set myself a morning aside just to have a play, but I'll keep you updated with everything that's going on. So I think I had a list of things that I wanted to say. I think I've covered just about every question. Oh no, last question. To back or not to back? That's the other thing. A few people have been asking about the backs of the piece of work. So this is the back of mine. I quite like the backs. I quite like it because it's the, I don't know, it's like the foundation. It's like the structure of everything that's gone on. I'm not technically correct with anything. I know if you're at the Royal School of Needlework, you'd probably be shuddering at this moment in time because my backs are not the neatest. I think that's one of the things that I like about the cotton wadding is some of the threads actually get hidden because it's a little bit thicker. You can, when you're stitching things down, you don't always see the stitches on the back. But because the colours match the front, I quite like the back, so I won't be backing mine. It's not as if it's going to be a piece that's going anywhere. It is just for me, so I'm not that worried. There are some sections that I do quite like as well, so it's sort of got itself all puffed up a little bit. So I do quite like the back, so I'm not going to back mine, but that's not to say that you couldn't back yours. If you did want to back it, if you cut yourself a strip of fabric that's just a little bit narrower, you've got a couple of things. One of them is you could, depending on your backing fabric, you could just use Bonder web and bond it on the back just to hide everything. But I think if I was going to do this, I would probably just do a little tacking stitch just all the way down the edge just to hold it in place. So I'd get a piece of fabric and I'd probably iron it so that you've got a really nice neat edge, and then just lay it on the back, and a little bit like we did with the Suffolk puffs, just do a tiny stitch just down the side. But because nobody's going to see it, I'm not that worried about my backing piece, but that's a personal choice. That's totally and utterly up to you. So I think that's everything. Quite a big video, probably the biggest one that I've done. I've got to upload it all now, so fingers crossed it's all worked, otherwise I'm going to have to film it all again. Thank you to everybody that's joining in. I will be setting another little challenge because some of you a few weeks ago sent me photographs of your work, and I shared those on an earlier video, and people really love seeing your piece of work. The next thing that I'm going to ask for is a photo of yourself working in your favourite work spot, be it in the garden, in the lounge, if you've got a little studio, workroom, just sat in your favourite chair, because I think it's lovely to see the faces behind the pieces of work. So if you're quite happy for me to share pictures of you with your piece stitching, I will put something on my Instagram and Facebook. If you're not on Instagram and Facebook, if you just email me at HanneMADE, I'll write that down, my email, so that you know it. So it's not at HanneMADE at all. It's HanneMADE at gmail.com. So if you want to email me any pictures, I've loved seeing everybody's work. I'm trying as best I can to reply to everybody. If I've missed your email, I'm so sorry. I will try and catch up and answer as many questions as I can. So I hope everybody's well on this lovely Saturday. Not as sunny here as it has been, a little bit overcast, a little bit grey. Ideal weather though for sitting inside and stitching, but the rest of my day is going to be not that exciting. It's catching up on washing and tidying and getting things ready just for next week, just so that I'm a little bit more organised with going back to work. If I am a little bit delayed in replying to you, that's probably why, because I've got to start doing some schoolwork again next week. So I'm not going to be as, I don't know if visible is the right word, online or whatever, as much as possible, but I will try and get everybody up to date. Thanks to everybody that's ordered stuff from my website. I am just doing deliveries on a Friday, just so that I'm not having to go out regularly. So if you want to order any kits, I'll try and get some more of the white ones online. My book's out of stock again, but I have done another order. I did another order last night, so hopefully we'll get some more in the next week, and I will keep my website updated with everything that's going on. So I think that's it for now. I think I've wobbled on enough. My mum used to call me a little bit of a wobble gob once I started talking, which is why I've had to have a list next to me of everything I needed to talk about. Otherwise I think I would have gone off tangent, which I sometimes do, and then I can't remember what it is that I'm talking about, but I think that's probably just my age as well. So happy Saturday, happy stitching, and I look forward to seeing you all and hearing from you all soon. Stay safe. Enjoy the next, I know in the UK, next 3 weeks of lockdown. I'm not sure what's going on where you are, but hopefully you are safe and at least you've got something to keep you going. Thanks so much for subscribing, and I'll be back soon.